This presentation is on bloodlines, and bloodlines can be confusing, but they're really important to breeds, and how to manage them and how to interact with them is important. So what are they? Why are they important? All those things have an impact on breeds and their futures, and especially for a successful future, this is important. Bloodlines basically are two basic types. One of these is a foundation bloodline, and the other is current, or breeder-developed bloodlines, something like that. They serve different roles for the breed, but in addition, they're both important. So you can't ignore one at the expense of the other. You need both, and you need both to be functioning and working for the future of the breed and for the consolidation of the breed, basically. Foundation bloodlines, what are they? Well, in my opinion, and I've been working on rare breed conservation for about 50 years now, so uh, foundation bloodlines are important. And these are long-term bloodlines. Ideally, they don't go back to other lines in the breed. And so what you've got is basically the basic building blocks that the rest of the breed is built on these components. And each one of these components is unique. Now, there's going to be some cross-links, some bridges between them. But in general, each one of them stands alone as something that basically the breed goes for. In a local breed or a landrace breed like the Spanish goat, that's an important concept because these breeds come to us from a history of very, very extensive distribution, and then usually a period where the numbers collapse somewhat. And certainly the Spanish goat fits that because it used to be quite common in the southeast and in the southwest of the United States. And then with the importation of various other breeds and with the boom in goat meat production, some of those lines basically were crossbred out of existence. And so what we have now is only a smaller representation of what once was possible. Saving those basic pieces becomes all the more important in that situation. Foundation bloodlines, especially in these old landrace or local breeds, you can find new ones periodically. And this is not new. They're newly discovered. They're not new. And you just you newly discover old lines is what's happening here. So these old lines need to be stewarded, and you have to argue with yourself whether we should keep them around or whether they're useless as we develop things from them. Fads are going to diminish some of them over time. This happens in just about any breed. And then in the future, you may decide that you need it. And so basically these old foundation bloodlines, this is the past of the breed. So this is how the breed got to the present. And now the current breeders can select among these different things for what they want. And in the future, hopefully, if we keep them around, those breeders can also select among these different things. The danger is that we will diminish those options for future breeders, and then we've taken away some of their options. And that doesn't seem quite fair because the past breeders have given us quite a few options and quite a few choices that we can have. One way to do this is actually to freeze them. So you can freeze semen and freeze embryos. And then basically, if you decide you need something in the future, it's there. But it's also nice to keep them around so that people can see them, can people can appreciate them, and then put the pieces together and use them as they see fit. Once again, these are the essential basic breeding blocks of the breed, and that's important for the future of the breed, because without those building blocks, you're going to not be able to build part of that building. The Spanish goat's fortunate. This is a list of what I currently know of. Hopefully it's an incomplete list because we hopefully discover other things. Bayless goats, Mississippi, about 100 of these left, so that's not very many. And the importance of these is that Mississippi origin. Basically very humid adapted, and so there's going to be very, very few of these foundation bloodlines for which that's true. Bodies is a Texas line. Some kinsing was added, but not enough to really change the character of the Bodie line. But now there's only 6 of these left that we know of. And so this is something that's really in danger of disappearing unless some quick action is taken and unless some others of these are found. The Bradshaw goats illustrate another issue with foundation bloodlines. The origin is from the neighbors, Jones, Robertson, and Abernathy, plus some from auctions. And what's going to happen here is that, as far as I know, Jones, Robinson, and Abernathy may be gone, so Bradshaw's all that's left. And there's only 11 of these that we know of, so that is another, kind of red flag for conservation. And then the story here with this group of goats gets a little more complicated because Devil's River starts with Bradshaw goats, but then has a Sawyer buck. And so, at this point, there's a few of these as well. But this may be a situation where, due to this relationship, you can blend these things together, come out ahead, and still save these things as something that's fairly unique within the breed. The Jericho goats are from Alabama, recently discovered. And the Shans, or Shan and Courtney, have discovered these and then basically secured enough of these to secure them as a foundation line. Again, that southeast origin is really important for adaptation, and probably about 50 of these due to the Shan and Courtney taking really good actions to increase the numbers and increase the availability of that line. Kinsey, one of the important foundation lines, up in the high hundreds or maybe low thousands by now. And Robert Kinsey was brilliant. I mean, he took these local goats, selected them, and over the years developed quite productive goats that were very, very well adapted and learned a lot in the interim. So he started with fairly small goats. He started selecting for size, got the size up, got the nannies up to 150 pounds, and noticed that they just didn't hold up as well as those 125-pound nannies. Took it back down to 125, and everything seemed to go quite well. So with these goats especially, that environmental adaptation is a key part of their success and a key part of why they're valuable to the goat industry. So we need to guard that really, really carefully. Guarding these foundation lines is one way. Guarding our selection and buying habits is another one. Coy goats, another one of these popular Texas lines with certainly hundreds, maybe low thousand. And Las Españolas, we're still investigating that one. Hopefully that'll develop into another one that's useful. The low country South Carolina goats, these were the feral goats off the islands in South Carolina. Again, highly adapted to that environment, probably up to about 30 now, and a few herds. Donna Askew is working with those carefully, and that's helping to preserve those. Middle Valley is one that was fairly recently discovered with a few Sifan goats added into that, but most of them just local. And that's going to be another, as we investigate that, maybe another important local source. This one would also demonstrate the idea that sometimes you find these things late in history. So just a recent discovery of something that had been out there. Moorfield goats, up in Ohio, nannies from a bunch of different places, and then billies from Wood and from Sifan. Very, very few of these left. Whether that's important or not is another debate, but certainly one of the component pieces. Poppy, another Texas line, originally from the Midkiss family, but then Poppy had them, and these are up around Kerrville, and only 6 goats that we know of. Richard Browning has about 2 of the 3/4 bred billy goats. These might be important to freeze so that we're for sure to save that. Parton goats from Florida, another sobering story of bloodlines, their importance, and what can happen. These goats numbered up in the hundreds until quite recently, and then the original owner died, and the heirs decided they didn't want goats. So they started selling off goats, and basically the numbers fell to about 6 or 7. And these were nannies that were fortunately in kid to the last billy, which had already been sold. Donna Askew got these through a long pathway through some Florida conservators that were interested in cattle more than they were goats, but assured that the goats got to the right place. And now with these in Donna's hands, they're basically expanding in numbers, and especially when these numbers get down so low, but with such a big population to begin with, if you have a rapid expansion of the numbers of these Parton goats, then you can assure that you don't lose that much genetic information. Pittman goats from the Texas-Mexico border, then up to Oklahoma, very, very few of those, very, very classy, sort of Spanish type. So it's worth saving those. Sawyer Neely, another Texas line, hundreds to thousands. Another good example of a family really stewarding that resource very, very carefully, selecting it and keeping it going. Smoke Ridge, nannies from a host of different Texas sources, probably only about 26 of these or so. That number may be a little bit low, but another one, basically another building block that we can use. Siphon goats, one of the common strains, up in the hundreds, maybe low thousand, but again, one of these common lines that serves as a backbone of the breed. Valera goats, mostly in Virginia now, but they came from bucks and nannies down in Texas, about 50 with a group of dedicated breeders that are assuring that they go forward. And then Weinheimer's, another one of these populous, high hundreds, low thousands lines that's unique to Texas. And then the wood goats from Ohio, from the southwest of the USA, so actually Texas, and then probably some other influences from further southwest. Very, very few of those remain, and again, another building block. The lessons here are that some breeds have not saved their building blocks. This is especially true for breeds that have gone in for real high production. So Holstein cattle for milk production, thoroughbred horses for speed, and what happens is then every generation you simply select for that one goal and you forget about the basic structure of the population. So how these different strains fit together, how these different strains work together, all that was forgotten in Holsteins and thoroughbreds until now we have a very collapsed population, and they're starting to see some vitality and some health consequences of that, especially on the fertility side. So a real cautionary lesson for those of us interested in bloodlines. Current bloodlines, some of these are foundation bloodlines, certainly things like Weinheimer, Kinsing, Sawyer, those keep going down into the future. And then some other of these old foundation bloodlines are now no longer in the original families, but secondary breeders have picked those up and become interested in conserving them. Other current bloodlines are blends, and the blends are extremely important because people take these parts of the different building blocks and they put them together for something that they think is important that they want. Both types, so the foundation types and the blends, are important. The breed needs both. The breed needs both to move forward, and the breed needs to celebrate both, and the breeders of both need each other. So that's essential. We need each other, you need each other, and you need a broad range of bloodlines, foundation bloodlines, and then blends from those bloodlines. We need to save them both. We need to develop them both into the resource that they can be. Current bloodlines are really any breeder's production, but some of these can lack uniformity if they're recently formed. And for example, a breeder with a herd that introduces a filly from breeder A, and then from breeder B, and then breeder C, and then breeder D, every year, every 2 years, you basically don't ever have a chance to really figure out which way you're going and what you're going to end up with. The longer term current bloodlines take about 4 generations. That's a rough figure. But you have a relatively closed population. You close it like that. You start generating your own replacements. You start stamping that with your selection goals. So it's going to give the uniformity that brings predictability to those goats. And people are going to be able to see that goat and say, gee, that looks like so-and-so's goat, because that predictability and that uniformity are there. One way to stamp these goats is to name them with your ranch name. My own are Beachkeld 2001. And Beachkeld 2001 would be the first goat born in 2020. Beachkeld 2002 is the second goat born in 2020. When I name the goats that way, those numbers actually go on their ear tags. And then with that Beachkeld name on there, that goat is associated with my breeding program. And so my breeding program, hopefully it's a good goat. And that's my responsibility. And if I name the goat that way, I'm taking ownership that I produced that goat. And I should have enough pride in what I'm doing to make sure that that goat's going to be a good goat and it's going to work well for somebody. So I want my farm name on that goat. So it's instant recognition of where the goat came from. And in addition, I get instant feedback on how old the goat is, the year of birth, and within that year, its rank in the birth order. So that, for example, if goat 2010 is a twin and it's bigger than 2001, that's a twin, then 10 is probably a better goat because it was born later and it still grew well and was bigger.